Welcome back, everybody. It's Important Nonsense, 32 teams in 32 days. Coming at you live today with the Atlanta Falcons, I should say, subjecting you to the Atlanta Falcons, taking you around the league, every team, getting you prepped up for the 2023 fantasy football season. I still cannot believe that we are this far into the year. Feels like it just started. Back again, PFF legend, Mike Manning. How's it going, Mike?
I mean, all we got to do is like squint past the quarterback and we'll have a fun time.
We'll see about that. We will see about that. At least theoretically. I don't know. We'll get into why it might not be a fun time a little bit later, but there is some level of optimism. Uh, Trade advice superstar Mike Burland. Mike, how we doing? How's it going today?
Yeah, good. Like you said, we got some players on this team. We just kind of wish they were in different situations and different teams, but they're there, and we gotta talk about them today. So, yeah, slightly better than the Cardinals, I'd say.
I do like the idea. I think the Atlanta Falcons slogan should actually be they're there. Put that on the merch. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, they're there. And of course, I am Neil Smith, once again returning to host the madness here as we get everybody set up and run this down. As always, 12-team PPR, God's format. This is focused around redraft. All the projections and rankings that you'll hear come from Fantasy Pros, our affiliate. We are happy, as always, to be affiliated with them. And all of the depth charts that we'll be reviewing come from Player Profiler. Shout out to Jack Kavanaugh. Hope you're well, buddy. The Atlanta Falcons. Mike Manning, you mentioned it. We got to squint. You got to really get into the camera. Really squint.
You said that when Mike had said about there's three top 10 picks on this team. Don't worry, the quarterback isn't one of them.
Far from it.
You get two choices. You get to pick. We got Desmond Ridder coming into his second year, and you got Taylor Heineke, one of the luckiest human beings I've ever seen exist. Like I'll get into my rationale for that a little bit later. Let's start with Ridder. Mike, I know you had a you just do your Desmond Ridder note, please, because you'll do it better. You'll do it more justice than I will.
Well, Ridder started 4 games at the end of the season, which was nice because they finally benched Mariota, who was playing horribly.
I was going to say Terabad, but yeah.
Everybody saw the best thing he did the entire season was that weird throw where he was like falling to the ground. It was like completely horizontal against the Panthers on like Thursday Night Football that just didn't become a sack, but it like went 30 yards out of bounds.
I do remember this now that you bring it up.
So that was about his highlight of the season. Even though there was high expectations because of what he did as a backup in Oakland or Las Vegas. Yeah, so Ridder sat there and played the 4. Yeah,
it's a good catch.
It's always hard, even now.
As I've said for many years, they'll always be Oakland until they earn it. They have to earn the right to be called Las Vegas. They got to win something.
Yeah. So in those 4 games, 3 out of the 4, Ridder had 0 touchdowns of any kind. Passing, rushing, receiving, I guess, anything. Special teams, none of it. He didn't have any kind of touchdowns.
That would have been really impressive if he had a special teams touchdown. I'd have given it up for him for that.
Yeah. So and he's never hit 235 total yards in a game, combining rushing and passing. So as we a bunch of people were excited as like a late round flyer for Dynasty and things like that because of his rushing ability he showed at Cincinnati, and he was one of the fastest quarterbacks at the combine. Nah. I think he ran like at most 6 times in a game, and I think his high was about 20 yards, and the rest were like 4, 6, 4, something like that. So optimism is hard to find in that area.
And that actually is totally backed up by the actual metrics. Ranked at quarterback 31, technical actual true ranking would be 230, so undrafted comfortably. His ADP I find interesting. It's 192. So he is in a 12-team league. He is Mr. Irrelevant. That is interesting to me as a gigantic nerd. I do find that funny. Mike Burland, Mike B.
Yes.
Be the voice of reason here. Can you give me any? What do you got? You got anything that's not just sprain negativity? I'll take sprain negativity if it's all you have. But
I'll try being optimistic. His last start against Tampa Bay, he threw for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you're hoping he's closer to that than he is what he did the previous 3 games. And he was a rookie, starting, so we got to give him slack there. Give him a season. He's the number 1 guy, and maybe he can all he has to do is manage this team to give us something in the receiver and tight end position. And, he doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. He just needs to manage this team and just be an average quarterback. And so if he can kind of do what he did at that last game, then maybe there's optimism, but not too much. I think there's more optimism with the backup quarterback, to be honest, than with Ritter, unfortunately.
Let's stay with you, Mike, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about Taylor Heineke. I mentioned at the top that I view Taylor Heineke as one of the luckiest human beings that's ever existed in football. Former XFL, manages to get into the league, falls bass backwards into the starting job with Washington because everybody manages to get hurt, and he plays just well enough to hold on to that job, but not well enough to actually do anything. Because of that, he parlays that into this job where he actually, once again, has the opportunity to fall bass backwards into starting, where I am confident that he will look exactly like he did with Washington, because I am not convinced that he is any good. So,
yeah.
But your argument is that he would be theoretically better than Ritter. What leads you to come to that conclusion?
I think so. I mean, if you just look at what Heineke did during the weeks that he started, he was quarterback 18 in I assume 4-point passing touchdown. So that's a super flex worthy quarterback. He really kind of hyper targeted Terry McLaurin, and he kind of made McLaurin more of a relevant player. He kind of throws up those YOLO balls, and then having Kyle Pitts and Drake London, those are 2 good guys to kind of just throw up those YOLO balls up too. So I just think there's a little bit more excitement with him. Maybe he can give you even a rushing floor. And I do think they go to Heineke sooner rather than later, because Arthur Smith doesn't have the luxury of another season of 500 or sub 500. So he needs to win. So I think Ritter's going to be on a short leash. So I do think there's slightly more optimism. I mean, over Ritter here, right? We're not talking about him replacing someone else. So I don't know. I just think there's a chance for Heineke to make one of these guys that we're going to talk about next relevant, while giving you a decent quarterback 2 points. Giving you decent quarterback 2 points that you can start in a super flex league. So.
Mike Manning, thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, public outcries related to Taylor Heineke? I'll take what you have.
I mean, as I said with the rushing floor for Ritter that was not there, that should have been there, I don't think the aspect of a rushing quarterback will help Bijon Robinson in any way, as it often does with, running quarterbacks with running backs. It usually helps them have a higher rushing production. So we're not seeing that either way. But Heineke certainly has at least a solid passing floor. Like last year, he was at least decent when it came to throwing the ball. He did do the YOLO balls. He's not afraid to go for it. And he at least hit 279 as a high last season. So that's something. He had also like 149, 138. Like, he's not a prolific passer by any means, but he threw at least a touchdown in 7 of his 9 games.
Yeah.
His biggest thing has always been interceptions, so I don't know if Arthur Smith's going to love that, but he has big targets, as we said, for Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So those YOLO balls, they're a basketball team. They have a chance to come down with it pretty well.
Yeah. I will concede that. I do also will concede the idea that I think Ritter is not long for this world, and you will actually see Taylor Heineke starting games probably by about week 7 or 8, especially if they're in the tank by that point. I have some further thoughts on Arthur Smith, which is just to say this. Arthur Smith, I think in his mind, thinks he's Kyle Shanahan. He's barely Jeff Fisher. Like that's kind of where he's at. Like I think in his mind, he's an offensive guru and a genius. I have very little evidence of that, aside from the fact that he has made a handful of players relevant that were retreads. But that's not really enough to tell me to claim like, oh, I'm a scheme genius and look at what I can do. And no, that's not really who you're dealing with. Before we move off of it, I will say Taylor Heineke, ranked quarterback 41, 417 overall, way outside of draftable. ADP 277, so the public agrees. There is no reason to draft Taylor Heineke. That is a waiver wire claim. The only reason it's relevant for this is that you should know he exists because there is a decent chance he will be starting football games for the Falcons at some point later on. And now we are done talking about the quarterback situation. Let's talk about something that actually might be fun. Let's talk about running back. Let's talk about their desire and their force of will that allowed them to get Bijon Robinson out of Texas. Consensus number 1 fantasy in Dynasty. You know, he's the 1.1 in Dynasty in every single thing. And as it relates to redraft, he's going very early. He has all the pedigree you could ever want coming out of Texas. He was a phenomenal college athlete and projects to be a sensational NFL running back. As such, it is expensive. He is the RB5 coming into the season, being drafted at 5 overall. His ADP is 9. I will just say this. I have no issue with Bijon Robinson's talent at all. Can't deny this. Can't argue about it. It's all there on tape and it's all there on the combine. I get heartburn being asked to draft a rookie running back that high to anchor my team. But that's just my personal thing. Mike, I know you had a note on the Falcons' general rushing philosophy. So I'll kick it to you here first.
Yeah, I mean, last year they were the only team that went above 50% run rate because this is 2023 and not 1993. And they are the only team not named Baltimore Ravens since 2012 that have hit that mark. I think Baltimore has done it twice in that time frame. So going about 10 years back, in the past 10 years, only Baltimore and now Atlanta has ran the ball over half of their plays. And remember, they were not winning often last year. He did not care. That is why Tyler Algier, a 5th-round pick, had 1,000 rushing yards. He was solid. Now we're looking at Bijon Robinson, a top 10 pick, who is arguably the best running back prospect we have seen in decades. There's comparisons for maybe Saquon Barkley being up there as well. So he might not be the best, but this is a player that can catch the ball, can run the ball, breaks tackles. Like, there is nothing this player can't do. So if you're going to give that guy a healthy touch rate per game, healthy touches per game, he's going to produce. Like this, there is very little to show that, especially with historically, whenever it comes to rookie running backs that were drafted at that range as a top 10 pick, you know, guys like Zeke or Christian McCaffrey or players like that, they were drafted early and they hit their expectations most often. Even Najee Harris, who was not an actual productive player in terms of like efficiency, he still had the volume to get him there. And that's what these teams are going to do. They're going to run their run. That's why this running back conversation is happening now around the league about just not paying them and things along those lines. Well, it's because these teams are going to draft them and they're going to use them in their rookie contract. That is a guaranteed.
You're going to use them up, franchise tag them once, out the door. Draft another one. Franchise tag them once if they're good, out the door. And we're just going to keep doing that over and over and over again. That does seem to be the way the wind is blowing. So, Mike, let me ask you just a quick question before we move to Mike B. Are you at all nervous? I don't get the impression, based on listening to that you're at all nervous about taking him, let's say, at 9, which is where his current ADP is. Are you okay with that? Is that? I know it would depend on what other options are available, but let's talk about in a vacuum.
Yeah. Say we're rid of like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and like Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, a bunch of the guys that hit top 3 last year in terms of running. I think that I'd be okay with drafting him at the back end of the first round because of what situation he's in. Obviously, we said he's like one of the best talents at running back we've seen come out of college in memory. He's going in a run-first offense, as we just said. Arthur Smith is not going to change his philosophy after drafting a running back at 8th overall. And then he's running behind.
If he did, he'd immediately get fired. So
one of the better offensive lines that just paid their guard, Lindstrom, still has Jake Matthews. So this is still a very good offensive line with McGarry in them. And they're not in a great division.
That is true.
So they're sitting there, and they could easily actually, in their divisional games, obviously the Saints are, I think, considered the favorite at this point. Tampa Bay has Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask at quarterback, even though they have the defense and the weapons. And you're looking at Carolina starting a rookie quarterback likely. So why not? As long as Atlanta's quarterback doesn't throw games away, then this Atlanta team could be a surprise in terms of win totals as long as they are able to get the run game going like they did last year with Algier and Patterson and company, because there was other running backs he decided to use. So with Arthur Smith's job on the line essentially at this point, why would he not use his top 8 pick running back as a bell cow?
All right, you're starting to win me over. Mike B. What's your take on Bijan for this season?
I'm in on him as a first rounder. I think about, if we take that same approach and we think about Saquon Barkley, if you're hesitant about him, and then he goes off his rookie year and he was the RB1, going into the next year. Kind of the same thing with Jonathan Taylor. He quickly became, RB1, RB2 the following year. Even Breece Hall last year, if he had stayed healthy, probably would be maybe the, RB1 or RB2 this year. So I'm fine with Bijan.
Don't talk about Breece Hall. You're going to raise his ADP. Don't talk about it. I'm glad he's on the pup. Keep that ADP down. Keep it down. I don't want it.
Yeah. I'm fine with Bijan in the first round. Later the first round, after, like Mike Manning said, about those receivers are gone and Saquon's gone and Eckler and McCaffrey. I think he's in the perfect situation. We talked about it with Arthur Smith. 3 of the 4 years that Arthur Smith's been an offensive coordinator or a head coach, the team's been his teams have been top 3 in rushing and top 3 in rushing attempts 2 of the 4 years. He made Tyler Algier a 1,000-yard rusher, not him, but the system and the offensive line made Tyler Algier a 1,000-yard rusher and average almost 5 yards a carry. I just think Bijan's going to explode on this team. I'm expecting a lot out of him, and so I'm totally fine with him being a late first-round pick. I am curious. I know we're going to get into the backup for a second. I just have a kind of a question for you guys. There's a lot of going on with the running backs, and it seems like we're on the verge of maybe something changing or potentially changing with the running backs and how they're paid. Do you think there's a chance that teams, especially a team that invested, the 8th overall pick in a running back, they're going to want to get value out of him, and they use him more in like a hybrid role, and they give Tyler Algier more touches than we're expecting, and they use Bijan as like a 12 to 15 carry and a 5 catch type of guy, almost like a Deebo Samuel with more emphasis in the rushing? Do you think that's like a possibility? And a backup like Tyler Algier still gets 150, 175 touches, carries this year?
I'd say there's a non-zero chance, but it's not something I would be banking on.
Yeah,
I'd be more. Go ahead.
I find it hard to believe that they would draft a player at 8 and use him as a Deebo Samuel type role.
With Arthur Smith's job on the line, no less. That's the part of it that I want to stress, because if I'm getting fired, I'm not getting fired for something like that. I'm getting fired because I ran my guy into the ground and it didn't pan out. Like, I'm not going out like I'm getting too cute. Like, no. We're gonna do the thing we project to do. But I would say there's a non-zero chance that some of that happens. Like, especially early, you could see Algier pick up some more of like the middle of the field work, the inside the 20s work, maybe, or maybe vice versa on that, depending on how camp goes. Maybe early in the year, you have some of that as he dips his toe in. But I'd say by the end of the year, no, Algier is just the pure backup spell guy. And
As
then
we saw last year with even Breece Hall, who was not a first-round pick. He started slower and then was like a pretty relatively close split with Michael Carter. Mm-hmm. But then it didn't take long for the Jets to realize like Breece Hall is just way better than Michael Carter.
It was about week 4, week 5. They just gave up. They were like, it's Breece Hall's job. Sit down, Michael Carter. Like, you don't exist. Like, you're done.
Could he start slow? Sure. I mean, any rookie could start slow, but I could easily see that I would as a coach, give the number 8 overall pick that's considered to be as talented as him as many touches as he could handle. If he starts to wear down, we could see a change in philosophy and use a little bit more of a Algier as the just ramming.
The battering ram.
Yeah. But it's hard to tell with I would expect 300 touches easy.
Yes, that's kind of what the projections that are out would lead one to believe, and I think that they're not far off. We've talked a lot about Algier without addressing him directly. Let's do that now. We mentioned Bijon Robinson going at 9 overall. This is a team where I would absolutely prioritize getting Algier if I am going all in on Bijon that early in the first round. I would make it a point to get Algier, largely for this reason. Tyler Algier is currently Mike, someone's breaking into your house. You should go see about that. Like,
we're good.
The Algier is ranked RB 42, right? 121 overall would be his ranking. His ADP is 124. That's prime handcuff territory. I'm fine with that.
Sure.
I would make it a priority to get that done if I'm going in on Bijon, because God forbid something happens. We saw Algier have success when he had the whole job last year. He's better than just a tomato can, despite the fact that he's a 5th round pick. Draft capital matters a lot less when you're in year 2, when you were a 5th round pick, especially. Now it's kind of just down to like, all right, can he play? Sure, because he's under contract anyway. They also still have Cordarrelle Patterson, which is funny because he's also being drafted, which is I find interesting. I think, Mike, this talks about, you mentioned the running metrics that you did at the top of this, the split. I think this is why you would have 3 running backs getting drafted. He's ranked RB 57, 177 overall in rank, but ADP is 188. He is getting drafted at the end of drafts. I'll be honest with you, I would leave Patterson to someone else. I'm not interested in drafting Patterson at this point, nor am I interested in Caleb Huntley. He's still there, but I'm completely uninterested in Patterson or Huntley. I just don't see how Patterson gets on the field. And to be honest, I've heard a lot of rumblings. They've been talking about trying to trade him. And if they can't trade him, that he might be a cap casualty. They might just cut him because they just might not have the roster spot. So this is being recorded on July 19th, right? As training camp is starting. We'll update this as it goes. But I could very easily see Patterson not actually making the 53-man roster. And that sucks for me as a Patterson apologist. But if I'm telling you to move on from Patterson, I think you should probably listen, because usually I'm the one saying, like, no, he's still got something left in the tank. Like, I'm kind of over it.
He could be the second best wide receiver on this team, in my opinion. But
I would see them move him back to wide receiver before I would see them like use him as a running back much.
Right. If they can't trade him and decide not to cut him, they move him back to wide receiver and have him play slot. I could see, or something like that. Sure. I could see him do that.
A gadget in general, because his touches went down at the end of the season, and Algier's went up because they just saw more production, obviously.
Right.
And even his receiving work he only had one game that was really more than 4 catches. So he's not in the receiving game in the backfield. He's becoming basically just a special team player,
right,
for return work.
And he's always done that. That's what he did in college at Tennessee. His issue with being a wide receiver, which is what he played at Tennessee, there is not an ounce of route running in that man. He cannot run a route, and that was his whole reason he can't play wide receiver. He just can't do it.
Almost 33 years old.
Well, that is now a new problem. Yes, he is now also on the wrong side of 30, and he never learned how to run routes. And as we know, Mike, you and I both know this. If you're going to last at wide receiver in the NFL, you got to learn how to run routes because that's what's going to keep you in the league when you slow down. You know what I mean? Is your ability to get separation that way. He can't.
I'm not touching Patterson at any point in any draft whatsoever.
I agree. Mike B, any interest in Patterson? I think we all loosely agree on the rest of the running back room, though, with Algier.
Nope, I'm not interested. I will say, though, I think he should be a Hall of Famer as potentially the greatest kickoff returner of all time.
Devin Hester would like a word. Devin Hester would like a word. Devin Hester would like a word. I know Devin Hester's agent. I'll get him in contact. Don't worry. You'll get a DM later tonight.
Kickoff returner, specifically kickoff, I think it's Patterson. So that's all I'll say.
Fair enough. If you qualify it that fine.
Yeah.
Hey, it's part of the game, at least for now. It's maybe for
today.
Might not be much longer.
It might not be that much longer. Absolutely. We're going to move into wide receiver here, folks. Wide receiver is interesting in this room. You've got Drake London, who we will get into just momentarily. Matt Collins, who we will also cover momentarily. They only have 4 wide receivers. The other one is Frank Darby, who has knocked around the league for a minute and is not good. And Scotty Miller, little Scotty Miller from Tampa Bay, running down the field with his arm up. His only job was that, and he's surprisingly effective at it for a guy who I swear to God is like 5'7". Like, he is not tall, but he can run. No interest in the last 2 names. Only two wide receivers that matter. And I would be, that's generous, by the way, with setting that up that way. Let's talk about the one that actually really matters first. We'll just get it out of the way. Drake London coming into his second year. I'll just do the numbers real quick here, folks, and we'll get into it. He's coming in as the wide receiver 24, which would translate to the 54th overall selection, and his ADP is 61. I have no issue with that.
Not really. I mean, if you're looking at him last year, like, he was targeted a lot. It was just by Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder. So those targets, as we have said multiple times, have different values. There is different importance when it comes to having targets by certain quarterbacks. I will throw those 2 in that certain category.
Yes. Because do the full note that you have, Mike, because it's fantastic.
He was 4th highest target rate among wide receivers last year with a 27.2% target rate. That was tied with Devontae Adams.
Pretty good.
That's very good. That's
pretty good.
Like, how often you're targeted when you run a route.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's good. That's very good. Obviously, Pitts did miss time, but it's still.
But he was a rookie.
Yeah,
like, that's impressive for a rookie.
So the problem is he only had one 100-yard game, and it was the very last one that Ridder had 240 or something passing yards, whatever it was, and he only had 4 top 24 PPR games. So he was only a wide receiver 2 even in PPR. 4 times. And he played the whole season. He didn't miss any time.
He did.
So that's scary. That's an Arthur Smith problem.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Like,
an Arthur Smith / quarterback problem.
Offensive genius Arthur Smith. Like, that's the issue.
I think there's a big difference, though, between a number 8 wide receiver taken by Arthur Smith and a number 8 running back taken by Arthur Smith.
I can see that.
He knows how to use one.
I'll concede that point.
It's not the wide receiver.
I'll concede that to you all day long. Mike Burland.
Yeah.
We've kind of been pretty positive about Drake London here. Where do you stand on London coming into his second year?
Yeah, it's tough. We again kind of wish he was on another team, but he's not.
So does he.
Yeah,
I'm sure he does too.
The Falcons last year only completed 10 passes that were thrown 20 yards or more in the air, which is obviously, if you do the math, that's less than 1 a game. That's really bad.
I didn't look that deep into it. It's you know it's bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. That's bad.
It's pretty bad.
It is bad. It's really bad. And
is it 1994? Have I gone back in time?
For Arthur Smith, it is. I'm just worried. We're going to talk about the next guy, at the tight end position, but I'm just worried you get kind of 2 mediocre, slightly above average seasons from London and Pitts, and it's just for London at the wide receiver position that just doesn't play. Like a 800-900 yard season, and who knows with touchdowns. You can never really predict touchdowns, but I like, the target percentage, and he obviously, like Mike Manning said, getting the fourth most, the highest target percentage, 14th in yards per route run, which is usually a pretty good stat to kind of predict fantasy success, but it just didn't translate because the Falcons just weren't throwing the ball, and I really don't see that changing. You just invested an eighth overall pick in Bijon Robinson, so I don't really see them changing from what they did. And you know what? They could actually probably win games that way, and maybe win this division playing that way, because they have an improved defense, a decent defense. They can run the ball, control the clock, and Arthur Smith's gonna look great, and they're gonna win 10 games maybe and win.
I don't know about that.
So.
He'll look acceptable.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say about this is my one concern is that you're talking about taking him at the start of the 5th round. That's what 61 effectively is.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's a bit high, because the only reason I say that, because what you're hanging your hat on is what you talked about, Mike. You're talking about the straight up volume of it,
efficiency versus volume.
Right. And the concern that I have with that is the quarterback play. Now, he did that with Mariota, and that was bad. So he's proven he can do it with bad quarterback play. But there is always the but with that, where if something doesn't go exactly right, you could be regretting taking him in the 5th round. Now, I will say the other reason you bring this up is at 5th round, by then you're talking about wide receiver 2.
Which, again, he only had 4 games of that.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even like high-end wide receiver 2. That was just, in general, he was a top 24 at somewhere wide receiver.
Yeah. So
the funny thing also is, could you imagine the fact that whenever you were going into the draft for 2022, there was 2 teams that you basically knew were going to take a wide receiver in the top 10. It was the Falcons and the Jets.
Yeah.
What if Wilson and London switched spots? How happy would London be now?
Ooh, yeah, Aaron Rodgers throwing me the ball.
I don't think Wilson would have gotten Rookie of the Year if he was in Atlanta.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay.
Poor guy.
Well, that's the way it works, man. That's how the NFL goes. Like,
no other wide receivers matter. We're lucky that London even has a chance of mattering. So
yeah, I will say I could understand the fear of not wanting to take him as my wide receiver 2 in the 5th round. So
yeah.
I do understand if you were a little scared off by this. I wouldn't blame you necessarily if that was the price you were being asked to pay. If he falls lower than that, though, there's a pretty juicy upside on that. So it depends on this is what we always say: let the room come to you. Draft with tiers and wait and pick your moment. Don't reach. Typically, when you reach is how you screw yourself. So we'll talk about the final player, because there is no other player that matters. I know Jonnu Smith is on this team. I'm sorry, Steve. You're going to have to buy yet another Jonnu Smith jersey to add to the collection. That's what, 5? 4? Something like that. Unfortunately, Jonnu Smith does not matter. He is basically just a guy. He's there. He is not relevant in any way other than he exists. And good for him getting those paychecks. But we do need to spend a little bit of time talking about Kyle Pitts. His second year. Third year.
This is
third year of Kyle Pitts. Yeah. It all blends together after a while when you get old, guys. But yeah, currently tight end 5, 52 overall, ADP of 66. So he's going just behind London. So he's in that 5th round. Historically, for me, as tight end doesn't matter, man, unless your name is Travis Kelce, I don't roster folks like Pitts much, because I'm not going to spend a 5th round pick on a tight end. I would be infinitely more likely to take Drake London in the 5th round than I would be to take Kyle Pitts in the 5th round. Now, the caveat to that is, well, Neil, he's basically a giant wide receiver. Okay. In that respect, I might be willing to play some patty cake with you and say, all right, if that's what floats your boat. But for me personally, I don't roster too much Pitts. It's a roster construction thing. It's an overall strategy thing. I do get the hype. He's a big dude. He's fast. He can high point a football. There's a lot of positives from him from a physicality standpoint and a rushing standpoint. I'm sorry, general running standpoint, not rushing. In fact, Mike, that's funny. I didn't even read your note until just now where it says Pitts is a glorified wide receiver. So we do agree on something, because he is a glorified wide receiver. So within that, I will say, typically I'm not interested in tight end in the 5th round. Pitts might be the exception. I think I would prefer London and go with the more traditional route because that's what I'm more comfortable with. But if you were going to put a gun to my head and say, you know, you got to take Pitts in the 5th round, typically I punt tight end all the way down. But Pitts he's not really a tight end. And the question I have is this, and Mike, I know you have some stats on this, so I'm going to go to you in a moment here to run through them. But my question is this. You went through the Ritter numbers. We all went through the Ritter numbers. Can this team support 2 pass catchers really consistently?
Support 1?
Right. That's my point. But 2?
Yeah.
2. Can you get 2? I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that you could consistently get 2 pass catchers out of this team based on how aggressively I expect them to run the ball.
Yeah. And I'm pretty similar in terms of there's Kelsey, there's a big drop, there's Andrews, there's another big drop. And then there's guys like Kittle, maybe, Waller if you want to, even though I'm scared of his injury.
I would go. I like Kittle and Pitts. Another drop.
Yeah.
And
then start to do guys like Waller and Goddard. But as soon as Andrews is taken, I'm immediately, unless it's a massive value, like I said, with the letting the board fall to you, unless it's a massive value, I'm basically not even looking at the tight end position until we hit to like the 8th, 9th double-digit type round.
Yeah, I was saying I'm like 12th round. I'll take 2 back-to-back in like the 12th and 13th round, and I'll be fine.
Yeah, Chigakwonkwo or something like that. Those are the guys that you're
going to
get.
Dulcich, like
I'd much rather them.
What's his name from the Bears? Who escapes me
Komet.
At the moment?
Komet.
Yeah, Cole Komet. I get all that stuff in like the 12th, 13th, 14th round. I get 2
like
it's fine.
Between Kittle and like I don't know, Freiermuth or Njoku or whoever it might be, depending on those middle rounds, I have zero interest. I just can't do it because the difference in terms of points between them, even consistently, them and the guys that are the upside guys that you might get later, it's not big enough for me.
Yeah, it's not.
Between that and the wide receiver you get in the middle round, or running back even,
or the running back round,
yeah.
That's the real damning thing is because the running back cliff is real, and you're talking about you've already gone off the cliff at that point, and
you need multiple of those guys,
right?
You need multiple running backs, you need multiple receivers. So you either get that stud tight end that you can just leave in your lineup and not care about, not look at, even for the bye week, you'd be like, all right, fine, I guess I'll throw someone in my other line.
I'll cut my worst player, pick up a waiver wire streaming tight end, start them, and then cut them immediately and go back to my stud. That's literally the strategy.
So, but in terms of Pitts in general, he spent 26% of his snaps in line last year. He was a wide receiver. He's out wide just like Drake London is. There's no doubt. So this 2 wide receiver set is those 2. It's not throwing Mac Hollins or Scotty Miller out there. And Jonnu Smith, who was brought in from New England, was in the blocking tight end in New England. He stayed in line while Hunter Henry was the one that ran routes. So Jonnu is just there to be the actual tight end for Arthur Smith.
Yes, to block. You did mention Mac Hollins. We actually breezed right past it because it matters so little.
Exactly.
We spent all this time talking about Drake London. Mac Hollins is there. I do want to bring this up real quick before we go to Mike B on Kyle Pitts. Mac Hollins, wide receiver 97, 282 overall, ADP 295. Mac Hollins does not matter. I'm tired of reading on Twitter about how Mac Hollins is a breakout candidate. Stop it. If you're writing that on Twitter, I hate you. There you go. I said it. Like it's unequivocal. I can't make it any more unequivocal than that. Stop trying to convince people that Mac Hollins is going to do anything. There's not even enough. They can barely support Drake London and Kyle Pitts. The only way Mac Hollins matters is if probably both of those guys get hurt at some point in the season. You know what I mean? There. I've made my rant. We're done talking about Mac Hollins. It matters. Doesn't matter. Mike B, Kyle Pitts, take us through it. I'd love to hear the thoughts.
Yeah. I generally agree with you guys about the tight end strategy that if it's not Kelsey or even Andrews, I kind of want to wait until the double-digit rounds. If for whatever reason I am going to take a tight end around this time, a guy like Kyle Pitts is the guy I'm going to be targeting because he's kind of one of, I think, 5 tight ends that could lead their teams. I can see them reasonably leading the team in targets, and Kyle Pitts is one of those 5. And so those are the guys that I want. And if you put gun to my head, Drake London or Kyle Pitts, I'm probably going to go Kyle Pitts because I think there's a decent chance that they both just kind of end up 800 and 900 yards. We'll see about the touchdowns, 6-7 touchdowns. And when you break it down to that, Kyle Pitts is way more valuable in that sense because he's a tight end. And that's really good for a tight end. Not so great for a wide receiver. So the fact that they're going, in similar ADP range.
It's 5 spots. It's literally 5 spots.
Yeah, I'm leaning Pitts. If I want a piece of this passing game in Atlanta for whatever reason, I'm going to lean Pitts just for the reason of, even if he has a mediocre season for a wide receiver standards, that's good for a tight end. There is that upside for Pitts. I think it's easy to forget. Like, this guy had 1,000 yards receiving his rookie year, like one of the greatest, if not the best rookie season we've seen from a tight end.
Mike Ditka would like a word. You just
most of us haven't seen that, right? Most of us haven't seen that, I'd say. But no, you're right, Mike Ditka. So besides Mike Ditka, and before most of us were born, Kyle Pitts has the best receiving, the best.
How dare you?
It was just the touchdowns, right? He had 1 touchdown, and that kind of brought him down. And touchdowns are fluky. So I'm still, if I am gonna take a tight end in this range, I am gonna go for a guy like Pitts because I can see him leading the Falcons in targets, and that's who I want to target at the tight end position.
Makes sense to me. We'll do final thoughts here, folks, because we've subjected you to enough of the Atlanta Falcons, and you're going to have to end up seeing actual football games from them at some point. Here's my kind of my final thoughts on how this actually will work. I think there's a reason that Drake London and Kyle Pitts are 5 spots off at ADP because I don't think anybody actually knows who's going to come out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that they're both going to end up returning on ADP. In fact, I would argue that they probably won't both return on ADP, but I think that's why they get lumped together that way, is because nobody actually knows who's going to win that particular duel, so they just put them right next to each other. And then I have one other little thought on this, the Falcons in general. This reminds me of the Tennessee Titans from a number of years ago. Bijon is Derrick Henry. Drake London is A.J. Brown. Kyle Pitts is Delanie Walker. He's significantly better than Delanie Walker, but he's ultimately Delanie Walker. And what did that team do? They went to the playoffs a number of times with this strategy. What did they do? They pound the ball up the gut 30 times a game. There was a stat at one point. Any game where Derrick Henry had more than 20 carries, they were 10-1. That was, I believe, one of the second year Derrick Henry had the job all to himself. And they had a good defense, and they ground the clock out. That is what I'm expecting the Falcons to be this year. I'm literally expecting that to be the strategy. We're going to be the old Titans. And to be honest with you, they could go to the playoffs that way. It'll be so ugly. But they could go to the playoffs in that division with that strategy. It would work. Is Arthur Smith smart enough to do that? I don't know and genuinely doubt it. Mike Manning, final thoughts. Take us home.
I mean, you're going to, like we said, Bijon, I'm expecting all wheels up for him. I understand the hype, and I understand that you have to spend a first-round pick. And you know what? If you have the cojones to do it, by all means, because at the back end of the first round, generally that works out to pick a rookie running back that's drafted like that. Otherwise, it's going to be London or it's going to be Pitts. It's not going to be both. Pick your poison. If you like to, I would go London, as we said earlier, but it's one of them should succeed.
Right.
At least somewhat. So it's just, which one is it going to be? That scares me.
It's the risk you run. Mike Burland, take us home. Say goodbye to the folks.
Yeah, just it comes down to the quarterback, whether it's Desmond Ridder, Heineke. Can they just manage the ship with 3 top 10 draft picks in Bijon, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts? Can they just manage it? Give us that 230 yards and a touchdown, 2 touchdowns here and there, and we can have some fantasy success with these guys. Yeah, it really comes down to those two guys. Whoever's going to be the starter, can they support these 2 pass catchers in Pitts and London?
Yeah, if Smith is smart, which obviously we said multiple times we don't know, there will not be a single yard go to a single player that is not drafted in the top 10. So we'll go to 3 players if he is smart.
Please, that's what we need.
That would be phenomenal.
That's not
what
a
a stat! If that actually happened, that would be amazing.
That's not a fancy aspect even. That's just a common sense aspect.
That would be amazing. It would murder Algier, but it would be the most amazing statistical thing that's ever happened.
Could save his job.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. On that lovely thought, I think that is the high water mark here, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow we will be in your listening world. We will be back to talk about the Baltimore Ravens, a team that actually might be a little bit more fun, a little bit more up tempo. But until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!